Bruh. Bruh. Hello everyone. Hi Ivano. Hi Saptarshi. I'm sorry, I will always butcher names and nicknames. I'm unable to read. Oh. So, how is everyone on this fine Friday? Oh, I have my tea with me. Apparently the Spotify web client is back to working. I guess they had to retask a bunch of servers because they had a lot of people unsubscribing from their service. Oh, great. Kimira, if you're watching George's YouTube stream, George's has been doing a lot of great work, and one of the things that I appreciate is him doing shout outs to the people that are streaming in the GNOME community, just like he does. And yeah, there's always a lot of people coming over from YouTube after George's streams. George's is one of the maintainers of GNOME Shell, and he's also one of the maintainers of GNOME settings, the GNOME Control Center, and GNOME Calendar, and GNOME To Do. And he does streams on YouTube a couple of times per week. He usually does streams on Tuesday and Thursday. He does streams in English and Brazilian Portuguese. He's been doing that for a while, mostly about fixing issues in GNOME Control Center, in GNOME Shell, and porting. Lately, he's been doing porting of applications to GTK 4. Yeah, he's everywhere. He really is. He's one of the core GNOME contributors because he's basically everywhere. Which is kind of a requirement for a GNOME maintainer, sadly, because there aren't enough. We aren't enough. We need more people maintaining stuff. Yeah, the calendar search. Yes, Georgia Stavrakis. Yeah, again. Yes, it was a lot of work doing the calendar search, but also in general, maintaining applications is a lot of work. I'm sorry I keep tweaking the mic because I'm trying to find a new orientation that doesn't completely suck for me and block my view of my keyboard. I used to be able to touch type. I lost that ability ages ago because I switched to layouts once too many times, and the end result is that I stopped being able to touch type while programming, and I haven't found a way to regain that ability. So sometimes I still need to look at my keyboard, and with my microphone in the middle of my field of view doesn't make it easier to do that. Oh. So for the people that have just arrived and do not know what I usually do, I typically stream on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And what I usually do is writing the developer documentation for GNOME, GTK documentation, the getting started documentation for newcomers, for new developers. Lately, I've been doing a lot of the work on writing the getting started tutorial on how to literally drop in front of your computer and start writing GNOME applications using Builder, using GTK, using libadwaita. But I'm also writing a set of tutorials for the UI components that are the basis of GNOME applications. So you start reading the human interface guidelines and their patterns, and then you read the UI components tutorials to know how they work, and then you can drop into the API reference to understand the complexity of how to write UIs using GTK and libadwaita. But a thing that I've been doing usually once per week is writing some code to familiarize myself more with libadwaita as a project. Libadwaita is, again, for those who are not already within the GNOME community or within the larger community of GNOME users and developers, is the new platform library that is going to be available starting with GNOME 42. So in March, it's already released as 1.0, but it's going to be officially part of the SDK starting from GNOME 42. It's a library that is mostly meant for writing applications that are integrated with GNOME. So that will follow the GNOME user interface guidelines, that will follow the theming for GNOME, that will follow the general user patterns, the UI patterns that we consider the defining characteristics of a GNOME application. I'm a part of the GTK development team, so you could say I usually work below libadwaita. Libadwaita is an extension of GTK, so it's more widgets, more classes that are based on top of GTK. But one of the things that I'm doing, also thanks to the sponsorship of the GNOME Foundation, is trying to not just improve the documentation of the platform, but also improving the content of the platform. So adding new widgets, adding new class, new API for applications that are both part of GNOME and are written by the community at large. Oh, Alatiera, So one of the things that I've been doing has been figuring out how libadwaita is put together. So coding style and documentation and everything, in order to contribute to it. So GTK to libadwaita is like Q to KDE libs, somewhat, yes. Another example is if you know Elementary OS, they have a library called libgranite. Libgranite is the platform library for writing elementary applications. Libadwaita is pretty much the same. It's the equivalent of libgranite. XFC also has its own UI library for their applications. I don't know if the name, I think it's libxfc UI or a libexo, something like that. Libadwaita is explicit for theming aspect. Not really. It's not. So theming is just a part of it. Back in the day of GNOME 2, every time we modified anything about how the human interface guidelines for GNOME worked, we usually had two options. One was adding new widgets to GTK, and the other one was basically describing how to put widgets together, how to put those UI patterns together using basic widgets. So at the end of the day, you ended up rewriting a ton of stuff. Early in the GNOME history, so just one second. Hello, and welcome to the history of GNOME. Early in the GNOME 1 history, we had a libgnome UI library that contained widgets and other classes that were needed to write GNOME applications. Because GTK was very new and still pretty much trying to be neutral up to a point, but yeah, was mostly written for the GNOME image manipulation program. So oh, hi Georges. Welcome. With GNOME 2, we kind of dropped libgnome UI because it contained a lot of stuff that was not really maintained, that was more for GNOME 1 than GNOME 2. So the overall effort was spent trying to add stuff to GTK. The main problem is adding stuff to GTK has the side effect of GTK being API stable for a long time. And the other thing is that not many people actually maintain GTK or develop GTK. There are very, very few people developing GTK. At this very moment, I think there is only one person that is full-time on GTK, and he's not really full-time on GTK. He works for a company that pays him to also mostly work on GTK. So there aren't full-time people working on GTK for GTK. In any case, just to keep the history lesson short, with GTK 3, we ended up adding more stuff, reintegrating stuff from GNOME and other ancillary libraries that, like, we used to call, there was a library called libsexy, which contained a bunch of interesting widgets that people could copy and paste or depend on. Then during early GNOME 3, we had the libgd. GNOME Builder has a bunch of other libraries like libdazzle, and there are a bunch of additional libraries that exist outside of GTK because, again, GTK moves not incredibly fast. Libeg, yes, Libeg was another library that was copy and paste. Yeah, it was copy and paste code. You are supposed to literally copy and paste files. This was before we had Git with submodules and before we had Mason with subprojects. So you literally had to copy and paste the files and remember to update them every once in a while. But it was mostly a staging area. The overall idea of Libeg was always iterate a little bit on the API and then take it and then merge it into GTK. That's why Libeg has 3 letters in the namespace, because then search in place was really easy and didn't break the coding style and the indentation. It was also called Libeg because we had libbacon inside Totem, which was media. Libbacon contained a bunch of stuff for media playback and stuff like that. So we had egg and bacon. And I think, I'm not sure because I never asked, but I think libpeas is also named for that particular kind of naming style. Yes, that's why everything in Totem is called bacon, because there was a lib bacon. Are there any improvements coming to Totem? I honestly don't know. I'm not involved in the development of applications. If somebody else in the chat is here and knows, absolutely, please answer. I only maintain a single application, which is develop, and I still look at GNOME dictionary because of I don't know, historical reasons and some form of affection. But yeah, so going back, yes, libadwaita exists because we need a platform library that moves faster than GTK. It's still based on GTK and follows the GNOME user interface guidelines patterns without requiring GTK, without breaking GTK. Because it's hard to keep an API that's supposed to be stable for 3 to 5 years in sync with design patterns and design styles that might change every 12 months. Oh, so today I wanted to work a little bit on libadwaita, and the widget that I decided to look at was the tagged entry that is currently used from libgd by a bunch of applications: Nautilus, Epiphany, GNOME Photos, which is essentially an entry with the ability to add tags to it, tag widgets to it. And a couple of weeks ago I did some progress with the how's it called, the stubbing of the functionality, and then this week in the off time I wrote a bunch of code to make it work a little bit. So let's see if I can switch to my desktop, and here we go. So I'm currently running, here we go. This is the libadwaita from now. I think I rebased it on the main branch, and I added entry with the demo. Right now it's unstyled, so as you can see there's no styling there. There's nothing that looks like an entry. Left to modify the styling for that. And then we have and I'm missing out the styling for the tag. But as you can see, I can add a bunch of tags. The tags will reflow using a flow box, and then you can delete tags. In random order. You can add them back. What are my plans for post-tagged entry plan for widgets? Post-tagged entry. I don't have many plans. So I've been looking around in the libadwaita issue tracker, and it's very immediate in a sense that it's very much still tracking the things that are needed to release 1.0 or soon after, which is fine. But I know that the design team has some additional ideas that haven't been finalized, and I think they still live in the design team issue tracker, not in libadwaita. My plan is actually to ask the design team what kind of widgets are still missing from libadwaita that they are looking at. What other kind of widgets we already share that exist in GTK 3 libraries. I think one of the main issues is that a bunch of people are porting their applications from GTK 3 to GTK 4, which means also dropping a bunch of dependencies that only build with GTK 3, like libgd. And the problem with that is that that will either cause some localized porting of widgets from GTK 3 to GTK 4, or will cause some redesign, and in order to adapt. If people have some plans for post GNOME 42, so between GNOME 42 and GNOME 43, I'm entirely happy to work on those. Strictly speaking, my contract with the foundation is limited in terms of days I can work on this stuff. Theoretically, it's open for renewal for additional time, but I'm not going to. Do not quote me on that. I'm not entirely sure. The contract I have is fairly specific, so I'm not going to be able to work on this stuff forever. Of course, since I'm still part of the community, I will try to also volunteer on some of this stuff. It also depends entirely on whether or not I will find a new job in the next 5 to 6 months, because right now I'm basically just freelancing. I might continue to freelance if I want. I enjoy having a roof over my head and food on my table, but I also enjoy not having to work an enormous amount of hours per week. I do enjoy not doing that. How many members are in there in the design team? It's a loaded question. We have a bunch of volunteers. We have a bunch of designers that work for companies, and those companies pay them not to work on, not to design like random stuff for GNOME. They pay them to work on them, to work on their stuff, and in some cases that work happens upstream. So I think we have the design team is I think 4 or 5 volunteers at this point. I honestly lost count, but it's 4 or 5 people. Oh, thank you, Pudding Vlado. Yeah. If somebody knows how to make money out of GTK, I'm all ears, and I'd be happy to contribute. But yes. Yeah, it's it's complicated. Making money out of GTK is hard. I sell GTK NFTs. Well, the source code is already on a blockchain because Git is already a blockchain, so we could sell that way. but I felt my soul throw up in my mouth. So it's not great. It's not a great plan. Oh, so looking at the debugging code, we have a bunch of assertion failures, probably because I'm trying to remove stuff twice or doing destruction. Yeah, probably this. And this one will cause the removal in the tag. Yeah. So we dispose the list model first. Oh, thanks for the follow, Jungle Robber. If only we could have our basic needs taken care of so we could focus on free software. Yeah, that would be great. That would be absolutely great. I mean, I'm still kind of bougie because I have a mortgage on my house. So I cannot, I at most it will pay my rent, not pay everything else. But yeah, if I didn't have to care about anything else, then I would definitely just work on free software. It's yeah. One sec. Yeah, it would be great not to have to deal with the problem of having a mortgage, having food. I don't have to care that much about having like healthcare because I don't live in the US, so I live in the UK, so I already have healthcare. But yeah, it's kind of a problem. Let me check. It shouldn't warn that way. One thing that I'd like to change in libadwaita, to be fair, is the fact that it doesn't use C99. Honestly, it's 2022. It is 2022. It should not be a thing. I'm already just to tell you how sad the story is. It's not possible that in 2022 I'm saying we should be using C99. Okay, so I'm clearly the main problem is that it doesn't break into the debugger. Yeah, because I didn't set the fatal critical. I need to inject that inside the build. Where are the environment? Runtime environment. Okay, so this one. I mean, oh yeah, of course, I cannot add that because I get a critical warning here. Bumping straight to C11, C17. C11 is probably useful. No, the only thing that C11 does, it's the atomics, which isn't a problem because glib already abstracts over that. And the other thing is the generic pragma that you can use to create generic, not generic, but multi-type function calls. The C17 doesn't buy you anything. It's just a bug fix release for C11 that clarifies some of the behavior of the spec. I've looked at the C2X papers, like proposals, and they are bonkers. But fun. Strictly speaking, the important thing would be to use C99, because then you have qualified identifiers. Then you have the declarations after statement, and you have like a bunch of other stuff that it's useful. Okay, so I need to add more to the build preference. It's gonna be GTK A11 none. Let's see if that works. Yeah, it works. So tag, then we close, and then we break. Perfect. Perfect. So I don't care about this assembly, but I do care about the rest. Where is it though? Here. Yeah, we are remove tag and get items here, but so we are tagged entry dispose. We dispose the list model. We dispose everything. We dispose the tag, and then we remove it. We're removing the tag here. So at that point, yeah. We're calling remove tag here because we are here. It's unfortunate because we are clearing the tags at this point. So yeah. We should probably just call and then we clear it. At this point, there won't be anything inside the object, the list store. So we run it again. Okay. Before tackling the style, I want to ensure that this thing doesn't fall apart. Yep, that works. Oh, that's great. So the way it works is, let's break it down. Let's break it down so that it's understandable and for everyone, and also for me, because I suck at that. So this is the tag object. So every tagged entry is composed of an entry, so a text field, and a list of tags. each tag is a little widget that contains a label and a close button. But the way we represent it is not by using a widget, it's by using an object there. So it's a plain object like a GTK stack page in GTK 4, or a tab inside Adwaita tab view. So it's a simple object that contains a name here, which is unique inside the tagged entry. So it's how we address the tag inside the tagged entry. So this object is completely, the contents of this object are completely private. They are not visible to the outside. You only have access to the object itself. So as we were saying, we have a back pointer to the entry. So from the tag API, we can go back to the entry using this back pointer. Then we have the name, which is a string, and it's the identifier for the tag. The label, which is the label that will be displayed by the tag. And we store it as an actual string here because it's easier to do that. Because it's easy to do what I'm going to show you in just a second. Then we have the tag widget, which is a GTK box, and it contains a label and the close button. And then we have a boolean here, which determines whether or not we should show the close button. So for instance, let's just give you an example of what I'm looking at when I when I'm thinking about a tagged entry. This is what I consider a tagged entry. So you get the text here, and then you get the tags here. So GTK3, GTK key map, and Windows. And we're gonna add the ability to click on them. But as you can see, it doesn't have a close or an edit way to remove the tag, because if you go here, you get here the control to remove the tag, because here is where you edit the labels, the tags of the issue. So basically what we want to do is exactly the same, having a entry that lets you like enter text, then you have the tags or the labels that are here, and you control whether or not to show the button to let you remove the tags or just display the tag with no editability, because you have other ways to edit the tag, for instance. So why do we have the label and the show close fields inside the tag object instead of just controlling the text and the close button visibility? Because whenever we create a tag, so we have the properties here. We have property name, property label, and property show close. The name one is constructor only, so it can only be set at construction time and cannot be modified. Label and show close, on the other hand, can be modified at runtime, or can be set when constructing the tagged entry inside a UI definition file, for instance, or when building the entire thing. So the label here of the tag is really a controller for the label, the text of the label on the button. And the show close is a controller for the visibility of the button on the tag. So what we do, apart from defining the properties here, is we add a label, and then we bind the property of the label property of the tag to the label of the label widget. This way, when we modify the label, we automatically modify the label of the text of the label, the contents of the label. And the same thing happens for the button. Whenever we change the show close property, we are actually changing the visibility of the button here. And this is done using GObjectBind property. Using a default binding. Bindings can also come with bidirectionality. So not in this case, because in this case the label widget and the button are hidden from the outside. But it's entirely possible to have other types of widgets that expose that the children that you control. So you want to have a bidirectional binding. So you change the widget, you also change the outer property. But this mechanism allows you to bind two properties, two objects, a property on an object to another property on another object. So whenever one changes, the other changes as well. And you can also opt in to vice versa. Right. So this allows us to cut down a ton of code that keeps the properties in sync. We also have a signal here whenever we click the button to close the tag, to remove the tag. We should probably rename this because tag close is a little bit meh, but yeah, it's fine. Whenever we click, we actually call a function that removes the tag from the entry. And this is why we keep a back pointer to the entry here. This one is a doozy. So remove tag, in order to avoid leaks, remove tag will release a reference on the tag object. But we are in the middle of disposing it, so we need to keep the reference count neutral, which means we need to acquire a reference here and then call remove tag. Remove tag will remove the reference, which means that now if you consider GObjectRef as reference +1, remove tag will do reference -1, which means the reference counting will stay neutral, and then we can continue removing stuff. And then at the end of the dispose sequence, the reference counting will be 0 and the object will be finalized. So all the memory will be collected. When reference counting happens at a distance, so whenever you start removing or adding references or acquiring or releasing references, it's always a good plan to leave a comment, not for other people, for yourself. In 6 months, I will have forgotten everything about this code base. So I will have to read the git log, and I will have to read the blame list, and then I will have to read the comments exactly like any other person that will read this code for the first time. The most fundamental thing. 6 months is It depends on how much of this code I wrote. So there is code that I've been working on for like a couple of months, in which case 6 months on the outside is the time necessary for me to recycle all the involved neurons. If it's just something that I wrote in like a day, I will forget about it at the end of the week. If it's something that takes a month to work on, then I will remember it. But otherwise, just, it's fine. There's a reason why we have Git. So I don't have to remember anything. Okay, this is the rough. Yeah, this is roughly what we think about when we think about tagged entries. If we want to style the entire thing, we will need to have a little bit better, more, let's say, more accurate CSS selectors. So the tagged entry is already defined to have a class, a CSS class. So a tagged entry doesn't have any, we call it, look, let's just say widget class set CSS name. And we use entry here as well. So this one will be styled as an entry by default. But in order to have, also we will have okay, let's see, entry text box. So what do we do? Again, let's go inside the entry and read what we are doing. So a tagged entry has tagged entry is an editable widget. An editable widget is anything that can have has text editing capabilities, single line text editing capabilities, to be more precise. We use GTK editable install properties to ensure that the properties of the editable interfaces are installed in the right place. So the interface is complete. Gobject allows you to have interfaces, but if an interface defines properties, then the interface implementation must override all those properties. If it doesn't do that, then you'll get a critical warning at runtime. So outside of that, then we have styling. We tell the style machinery that this widget, which we have to here, this widget will be styled as an entry. Entry is also what GTK entry uses, for instance. Let's see here. Here. Okay. So GTK entry has an entry style name and also has a bunch of other style classes possible. We are not gonna deal with that. And inside it will have a text entry, a text widget, which we already had. But what we do want is for the style machinery to style the text entry widget that the tagged entry as a GTK entry, at the very least at the beginning. So we're gonna run it. And yeah, now you can see it's styled as an entry. Let's see. There you go. So we already get a fairly decent style here. And that's already good enough. But we also want to distinguish this entry from any other type of entry that GTK or libadwaita might have. So we add a style class to the instance here. The entry is added to the class, but the CSS class is added to the instance. So we add a tagged style class. And now the CSS machinery will be able to say entry.tagged blah blah blah. For instance, let's see if I can. We should be able to use the inspector to do this. So there you go. Yes. So gonna get this. So you can see the CSS nodes. We have an entry here with all the information, and then we have a text and a flow box inside. For now, the flow box is inconsequential, but what we care about is this. So if I do entry background color blue, there it is. Let's see if there are other entries. I don't see other entries, sadly, but yeah, that's fine. But yeah, if I used entry instead, it would say that, oh, it still matches. But now, if we had other entries here, you would see them as blue in the background, in their background. But yeah, so we are using that tag, that CSS class to discriminate what kind of entry we're gonna match. So entry.tagged will only match tagged entries. Inside the widget that we call tagged entry, we have the text widget. The text widget is essentially what GTK entry is in GTK 3, but without the styling. Doesn't have any border, it doesn't have any background, it only deals with the text. And we tell it to expand in both directions. We tell it to add it to the tagged entry. And then we tell it to act as the delegate for the tagged entry, the editable delegate. This means that we set it up so that all the editing done, all the GTK editable API that gets called with the tagged entry is really sent to the text widget. So it's a complete pass-through. This means all the stuff that deals with input, all the stuff that deals with inserting, removing text, all the signals that get emitted, or the properties that get notified or changed. It's all done through a delegation pattern. It's very powerful. It's very easy to create new kinds of text entries, of single line text entries in GTK4 with this pattern, instead of having to subclass GTK entry and then essentially fighting against the fact that GTK entry is a complex widget. Another thing we do is we set the size of the entry to have 12 characters as the minimum and the natural size. So this is needed so that when we grow the number of tags inside the tagged entry, we leave room for at least 12 characters inside the text part. And then we reflow the list of tags instead of reducing the size of the visible size of the text. And after that, we have the tag box, which is a flow box, which is a container that basically puts everything inside in a single line until it hits the available space or the number of children that we want to have in a single row, a single line, after which it will reflow. So it will go to the next line and fill that up and then go and switch to a new row. And we add it to the tagged entry. So we have text and tags. And then we have storage for the tag objects using a list model. We use a list model because one of our APIs is get tags, which isn't implemented right now, but we'll implement here so it's visible. So, as usual, we do argument validation. So we return a list model with all the tags. Why we do that? Because then you can use the list model to monitor the addition and removal of tags from the outside of the entry. So we don't need to have signals that tells you, oh, somebody added a tag or somebody removed a tag. And also we don't need to add additional API to iterate over the tags. We give you the model object. Also because then you can do things like you have the tagged entry that shows the tags, and then you take the model and bind it to another widget that takes a list model, like a list box or a list view or other widgets that do that. And they will be able to show the exact same tags that exist in the tagged entry. This is another pattern that we use in GTK4 a lot. We expose list models for a bunch of our widgets and a bunch of our top level objects because it makes it a lot easier to monitor things. It makes it a lot easier to monitor things inside the inspector, but also makes it a lot easier to write applications and write libraries that have multiple views on the same object. We have to document this. The first argument is not technically needed because the documentation generator will not use it for methods, because the first argument is always the instance argument, which is the argument, the object where we are calling the method on. So it's always going to be the type that we're using, the type of the method that we're using, and doesn't really matter. But every other argument will be documented. Still, I use this pattern of describing the arguments, not by. In GTK 3, you would see this, like, you will see this a lot. And this is caused by the old documentation generator in GTK, which didn't do anything with that information. It would just print out the type as documentation. The new documentation generator is a little bit more smart. It's clever, and it will show the type of the argument automatically alongside the description of that argument. So a lot of our documentation still reiterates the type of the argument when that is entirely unnecessary, because we have the type of the argument already. Okay. So we did that. Another thing that I did was set a layout manager type. So one thing that happened, especially in GTK 3 a lot, was that whenever you had a new widget that contained other components, you would have to subclass likely GTK box or GTK bin. GTK box if you had more than one child, or GTK bin if you only had one child, but at that point you could add a box inside the bin, and you would be fine anyway. GTK 4 does not have bin, and we try to make more classes final, so not derivable. Instead, you can just subclass GTK widget, which is what I did here. And subclassing GTK widget gives you the ability to add children to that widget anyway, because every GTK widget can now contain children. You don't have to have a specific class like GTK container to do that anymore. But to impose a layout, you have two options. One is add a box or a grid or a flow layout or whatever you want to that widget, so have a nested widget inside it, or you set the layout manager type on the class. So at this point, GTK widget will automatically create a layout manager, which is an ancillary object that manages the layout of the children of the widget, and it will be of type box layout. So as soon as we start adding children to the tagged entry, like a GTK text and the flow box, they will be placed in a box, in a layout that is like GTK box. So the text first and the tag, the flow box after that, and it will automatically flip using if you're using a right to left language locale. So we eliminated an additional widget that you had to use, which means less memory. Of course, we added a new object, so it balances out a little bit, but it's useful that way. And then we set the accessible role for, again, accessibility purposes. This one is a text box, which means that assistive technologies will consider it as a text entry field. just like any other entry. Since it's the default, everything works out of the box to a point. So if we add a tag, tab navigation already works. So you can already navigate using the keyboard. So assistive technology should already be working pretty much as they should be. So it's mostly an issue of styling now. So from a styling perspective, let's see, if we do entry tag, we'll have to rename we could use tag here. We can reduce the font size, for instance. Right now it doesn't match anything because we haven't explicitly set a tag. So we would have to do something like box. But you can see, I don't know if it's visible that way, but yeah. The font size is already smaller. We can also do stuff like background color. Let's see. This way, then we have margin. Let's say 2px, and yeah, that should be fine. And then adding, and then border radius. That should be fine. Maybe not all this margin. And then entry button, background, yeah, none. Because we only want it on hover. Over round let's see, background color. I don't think we can. I don't think we can shade it. I'll look at that. But yeah, you can see here. Oh, Cadmus, hi. Do you plan putting those tags inside a scroll window? I don't think so. Because I can do this. It doesn't entirely make sense to have them, to scroll them, because the controls aren't going to be that good. Narrow window. It's the minimum size. We have 4. I'm going to add API to let you select how many tags per line, essentially, and probably also the amount of tags you can add. But it's probably better to have this kind of behavior. Like, to have this kind of behavior instead of having having to scroll the tags. Again, I'm using it as an inspiration the where is it? I lost it. Here. I'm using it as an inspiration the tags inside GitLab, for instance. So they will reflow if you go above the available, if you go over the available space. We don't use that many tags, but if you go on a GitLab project, I don't know if I have a link here. GitLab.com. No, I don't have a link to GitLab, to a GitLab issue, a real GitLab issue, but usually they have like 12 tags or 15 tags, and they just reflow. It's probably also a little bit more in line with the reactive type of layout. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm not so this stuff is absolutely unvetted by the design team. I need to first figure out a way to deal with this stuff, deal with the implementation, and then I can present it to the design team. The design team can come and destroy my work, and I will try to address the issues that are there. I am not even going to pretend this is the final design or behavior. This is what kind of makes sense to me, but again, not going to be the final behavior. Actually, I wanted to look at the style of this button, because then I can basically copy it. So it's 6 pixel of bottom of border radius, 16 pixel of icon size, yeah, right. So this one is going to be pretty much the same. Yeah, it definitely needs designer's touch. Again, I'm not even going to pretend this is anything close to a final design. Okay, let's close this and go back here. So we have to add the text one is fine. The flow box probably. Do we add a yeah, we add let's see, so text box, we add tags class here, and then when we build the tag object, we add a bunch of properties here. Like in this case, the label is going to be the tag name, so it doesn't need anything. And this one though will need the, it's going to be a button, so it's fine. So the internals do not need a class at that point, because they can only be accessed through the the complex selector of the tagged entry. So it's going to be entry.tagged label and entry.tagged button, or tags button and tags entry. So this is one of the things that I want to actually discuss with the rest of the libadwaita. So the question is, put an API to directly change the text and background color, because everything is built programmatically typically, and injecting CSS is a bit messy. That is true. I do wonder if this should not be part of the recoloring kind of API. So how do we recolor stuff at runtime? So from a programmatic way, yes, it's messy. The main problem is that if I add that API to programmatically color stuff, it means that I'm just injecting CSS into the CSS machinery from the widget itself. Whereas, yeah, so there are two ways of dealing with tags typically. One is you generate the CSS from user input, and then you save that inside a CSS fragment that is stored by the application itself. Or you use existing colors that come from the theme itself. Because, so here's the thing, every time you define the background color, you also have to define text color, because they have to be compatible, so to speak. So you don't set like black as a background and black text color. The text color gets flipped from gets chosen from light and dark. At that point, you have a limited amount of colors you can actually use. Again, example. Let's see. So if I want to add a label here and I create a project label, the colors at our disposal are this, and then you can also use a custom color. But ideally you start from a list of well-defined colors, because then with a well-defined color you also can select automatically the color of the text that goes well with it. Again, there are a bunch of options here and there. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to raise. It's a good point to raise. Whether or not we should have API that deals with this automatically. Internally, it will do it the exact same thing. It will generate a CSS fragment that will be loaded by the application. It's easier to do this, so store it somewhere and reuse it for later use, if you do it inside the application, because you can decide where to store it and when to load it and how to do it. But it's entirely possible to do it. It's how we do the color chooser in GTK anyway. So, but it's a good point. It's something that has to be discussed with design team and the libadwaita maintainers. Right, so that's the styling stuff done. Well, not done, but it's there. And we also have a demo there. I also, as I was saying, the other day I added a demo to libadwaita's demo application so I could test what I was doing, which is another part of the API. It needs a little bit of documentation because there isn't a lot, and also I need additional properties to the tagged entry, for instance the placeholder text. So let's see how to add the placeholder text. GTK editable does not have placeholder text. You have to implement it yourself. Then you route it into GTK text, but it's not part of GTK editable. Where are you? Right, you have tags with labels representing post flares, yes. Right. Yeah, I understand completely that use case. I totally agree. I don't know if the API is going to be that useful or not. Because once you add API for that, it means you are also restricting the styling mechanism that you might have, which is kind of complicated. So it has to be balanced. But it's, as I said, it's a good point. Tag be its own widget. Having a tag as a widget is also complicated. It doesn't match what we do in other widgets. In this case, the tag is an ancillary object that contains widgets. So I don't know if making it a widget is gonna solve any problem or make it harder. It's entirely possible to instead turn the tag object into a tag widget. Right, my main worry about doing that is that people might try to use the tag widget for other things outside of the tagged entry, and instead I want to ensure that the tags are tied to the tagged entry, because otherwise the API, the internals become messy and the API becomes more of a kludge. But again, discussion. Once I open a merge request and I present this for discussion, both in terms of styling and in terms of API, we can definitely discuss. I will make sure to put this the merge request on the libadwaita channel, and so that all the stakeholders that use something that's similar will be able to come and comment on this widget. And once again, I don't even pretend this is gonna land in libadwaita. This is mostly me trying to get a handle on the library, the coding style, the conventions of documentation and API design, more than anything else. If out of this comes a GTK widget or an libadwaita widget that can be used by somebody, then it's absolutely fine. Oh, hi, Alex. Hi. Yes. I was saying GTK text. GTK text has where is it? You should have a placeholder. Yeah, that's a placeholder text. Oh no, you were commenting the whole time and it was invisible. I'm sorry. Yeah, having the libadwaita maintainer here is a lot better. Oh, good. Yeah, I'll I might open a merge request that modifies the Mason build file to require C99. Oh yeah, that's a very good point. Light and dark variation. Oh yeah. And yeah, all the other things like dealing with eye contrast for everything else. Wrap box layout. Oh, okay. Oh, that is a good point. That is another great thing to point out. Yeah, no, definitely. We need designers for this. Again, not even going to do this behind the back of the design team. It's I do design of stuff in my I've done design of in my professional life, but we have a design team for a reason. Oh no! This is me like putting my hands like in front of my like a mile and a half in front of myself. So I basically just making sure that anybody that's listening to this, either here on Twitch or on YouTube later, will be well aware that I'm not even trying to do this behind anybody's back. Okay, so we have a placeholder text property here. Yes. So let's call it the same way. And yeah, we already use n props elsewhere, so and tag props, and then we use prop. Yeah, we have to do this because otherwise we have to split the file into a separate we have to split the tag into a separate file, and I don't want to do that right now because I want to access the internals of the tag from the rest. Commit without design approval. Oh no. Unless one designer wants to commit a thing, another designer disagrees. Yeah, I mean, people can think that being a designer is so different from being a maintainer. It's really not. We've had maintainers fighting in GNOME the past 20 years, so it's not like I don't expect designers to be any different. We are all human beings. We are all very opinionated. I mean, we're all very much human beings. We're all very much trying to do the best for the project. But everyone has their own opinion on how to do stuff. Oh, that was a very nice. it would, thanks to the CLang plugin, builder will tell you if you're trying to address an element outside of the size of the array. That's very good. I never noticed that. Okay, prop tag. Okay, so we can go back and we have placeholder-text here, number of properties. So now we have to and then we can do this. Okay. Next. I need to do this. String. This is so annoying. I really want to get rid of the property disaster, but it's so complicated. Oh, what am I doing? Oh, thanks for the follow, Dukies72. Oh no, what am I doing? It's not here. Yep, it's here. Really set placeholder text. And then what on earth? I'm so used to putting the setter first that I always get confused. In GTK, the setter goes first and the getter goes after that. And in adwaita, it's the other way around. So I get confused. Which is another reason why I want to get more familiar with libadwaita. Otherwise, I'll get very confused. Different coding style as well. Well, the tags API goes together. So set and get placeholder text. And then we do here the getter. Okay. set string. And it's okay. That's one. We need to install the properties, so we need to do here, and then we do let's copy the here, so we are consistent with GTK. Okay. Text. An empty back. No, I'm sorry. Read write. Static. Okay. Yeah, this is the annoying part of defining properties these days. It's so blah. And then we do install properties. No, sorry. Yeah, no, and props and oh, I need to double check the install properties. Right. Yeah, I always forget how to deal with this. There you go. Yeah, that's fine. Then we have the class in it that deals with that. Yeah, it's the same. Perfect. I was right. I was right. I didn't completely forget the entirety of the GTK API. I wouldn't be entirely surprised, but okay. And whenever we set the we need to add the API here. So it's going to be okay. And then we do straight here. Text. Maybe piece back. And then we do m3 props. Oh, we need to fix that. The auto completion sometimes is too slow. And then we have char. I guess we have to cast it. Yeah, Silang is low. Not everything is done by Silang. Some cases is the snippet engine that is not always as fast as it should. I don't know if it's a problem of, well, it's probably a problem of GTK text view. It's not the fastest text editing widget ever written. It just tries to be memory efficient, but yeah, no, I'm sure that Silang is involved in some way. It's not super fast in any case. I wanted to see if password entry did the same thing. Placeholder text. Oh, it doesn't even have like accessible stuff. Nice. Yeah. We also need to update the accessible property. So this is another thing that has changed with GTK 4. The accessibility API. So one of the things that we did for GTK 4 was changing the accessibility API from being out of GTK and inside an ancillary library that only provided the actual interfaces, the actual API, called ATK. Now, that was GTK 2 and GTK 3. For GTK 4, we moved the entire accessibility API into the library, into the toolkit. So now you have GTK accessible instead of having ATK object, whatever. And all the roles and all the properties, the relationships between widgets, and the state and everything else are handled by GTK using as a model the W3C ARIA specification. In this case, since we are adding a placeholder text, so it's text that is visible when the entry is empty. So assistive technologies must be aware that this text is a placeholder and will disappear as soon as you start typing something. Doesn't need to be read. It's not part of the entry, and you don't have to tell the user that is using the assistive technology, that the text has been deleted and then new text has been added, which is what would usually happen with a plain text entry. In this case, we are saying the assistive technology, this is a placeholder. It means that the text entry is actually empty and you can start typing right away. And as soon as you start typing, the placeholder goes away. It's contextual information that is necessary for people that are unable to see the actual widget and have to rely on being told what the widget is and does. So it's kind of important, and every time you write a new UI using GTK 4, you should always take care of the accessibility aspect, because the toolkit will do a bunch of stuff for you, but as a side effect of the toolkit giving you the tools to create widgets, custom widgets, much more easily and with more power than it used to do, the side effect of that is that you have to take care about accessibility, and you have to take care about styling, and you have to take care about a bunch of other things that were not as immediately obvious when you were just using an existing widget. I also know that not everyone cares about accessibility because they have no idea how it works. That's why I try to add more documentation on that side, and that's why I edited a little bit of the accessibility guidelines on the developer documentation website. I need to do a better refresh there, but ideally, just like you go on developer.gnome.org to read how to make a GNOME application fit in with the rest of GNOME, you should also go there to ensure that you're doing the right thing when it comes to accessibility. Okay, sorry about that. And then we can go back to right. So we added a new API. Let's see if it builds and doesn't blow up. Why it says defined but not used? What the hell? Oh, yeah. Thank you, C. For being useless at warnings. See if I can make this one a little bit higher. Right. Okay, run it on the debugger. Okay, yeah. Nothing has really changed, but we can do here. And then we can get the property. We can set a property here. Name placeholder-text. Translatable. Yes. Ah, yes. And we rebuild it. Haha. Good. What is it doing? Okay. Why are you complaining now? 91. Oh. What the heck? This is tab completion gone completely mad. Okay, let's start the application. And there you go. Why? What is it doing? Okay, another problem. Let's see. Oh yeah. Of course. It only installed the name property. Again, thank you C for being useless. And thank you GObject for making properties so complicated. Yeah. Okay. So this is it's a good point. Yeah. Let's see if we have other missing stuff. We definitely don't have the documentation for the tagged entry, so we need to add it. Entry that allows you to tags near it's a very bad description, to be honest. I need to add a better blurb there, because right now it's basically pointless. But okay. The libadwaita widgets also have the CSS nodes, so we need this. Which let's see. Let's use a single status node with the main entry and the CSS class. CSS nodes in docs are mostly just by inertia from GTK doing it. Not sure how useful they are in practice. They are useful because people are looking at them. Well, they're useful in GTK, let's just say, because people are still writing themes for GTK. And that means that they will have to look at the GTK API reference to know the CSS selectors. Or if they don't look at them and they ask questions on Discourse, Reddit, or wherever else, I get to point them at the documentation whenever I've answered that question. For Adwaita, it's probably a little bit different because we're not expecting people to theme stuff. Still, it's probably useful to describe them. I'm not entirely sure if it's worth it, but I mean, I don't know if we're expecting people to not theme, but we're expecting well, the style is going to be the same until we break API for Adwaita, right? And yeah, custom styles for applications, but I don't know. I mean, we do use the inspector a lot, yes. And by we, I mean GNOME developers use the inspector because we know it exists. The amount of people that are not aware of the inspector is kind of worrying after I don't know how many years in which we tried to point people in the direction of the inspector. Still, if people are looking on Google or wherever else for documentation about CSS, they will probably hit their API reference. Yeah, I hope that the enabling out of the box will help with that as well. Yeah, it wasn't. So the reason why it wasn't enabled by default in GTK 3, originally it was enabled by default in GTK 3. We had to disable it because it conflicted with the key combination conflicted with Firefox. Firefox used one of the same combinations. So I don't know if Control-Shift-I or Control-Shift-D brought up the Firefox inspector, HTML inspector, and we added the same key combination, and suddenly it would pop up the GTK inspector instead of the Firefox one. Firefox does not use the GTK 4, so yeah. No, I don't know. Also, it was kind of weird, like popping up stuff. I don't know. But definitely it's a lot more useful to have it like pop up by default. My main problem is that on Flatpak, I continuously have to tell it to, yes, I want to, I want to view the inspector. You don't have to ask me every time. If I press the key combination, it's likely I want the inspector. Yeah, no, it's the other way around. If you press Control-Shift-I, it would pop up the GTK inspector, not the Firefox one, and you would expect the Firefox one. So we intercepted that, and we basically broke the Firefox inspector, which was not. The Firefox developers were less than enthused about that. It was good fun. But yeah, it was one of the reasons why we had to disable it by default. The other one was you're using an application, you press Control-Shift-D or Control-Shift-I and blah. Yeah, no, at some point Firefox completely disabled everything just to avoid any particular issue. I don't know if Firefox will ever use GTK4. So the question is what changed with GTK4? Firefox does not use it, and I don't know if Firefox will ever use GTK4. To be honest with you, I think Firefox should probably use their own toolkit at this point. But yeah, they already do, so it's not like it's weird. But if they still stay on GTK 3, then whatever. But yeah, I also think now they completely disable the key combination. So as soon as you get the key combination for the GTK inspector, if it conflicts with the Firefox HTML inspector, then they will just block that. So it will never pop up with that key combination. At least I think. I honestly haven't tried it. It's also something that I would never do with Firefox. Just open up the GTK inspector. Why would I ever do that? Okay. So let's see. Right. So I'm not entirely sure I want to get into the styling rabbit hole here, because in order to style that the style a new widget, I have to modify the style sheet, and the style sheet is a bunch of sass, and I'm not good at that. So I'll leave it like that, and then I will just tell I will tell Jakub to look at it, and then it will curse my name and the name of all my ancestors up to the 7th generation, and then he will try and fix it. Yeah, having CSS variables in GTK would work. The problem is, as soon as you start implementing GTK variables the way they're defined by the W3C, you get into a mess. I was, back when I worked at Mozilla, I was tasked to implement the CSS variables in Gecko. I left. Not because of that, but mostly that was one of the things that I could never do that. It was such a mess. Yeah, it might be cursing his own ancestors. Well, at that point, he will have only himself to blame. Yeah, the entire thing is a mess anyway. The main issue with CSS variables is that they're not just a simple way to replace values. They also cascade. And once you start cascading into the thing, it means you have to store the tokens. You cannot just resolve. So the way you would implement it naively is you resolve stuff and then you replace the values. But that is not what the variables actually do. You have to store the token stream for that variable, and then every time you encounter it, you have to reparse the token stream, so you can error out and you can deal with the changes there. You can deal with the substitution at the right place. It's not, I mean, it's not impossible with software. It's just a parser. It's again, web browser is implemented, so it's not impossible. The main problem is that I'm not entirely confident that the current CSS parser can save the token stream. But yeah, being able to replace stuff at the point of definition is a much more powerful tool than generating SCSS and then parsing it or whatever else. yeah, also will allow you to replace the alpha, and if you want to do, especially, yeah, Benjamin also wants to deal with HDR, and that comes with its own color specification and color that lets you define colors, at which point, yes, you need variables. You cannot deal with anything else. So yeah, the way you implement it is the parser, as soon as the parser encounters a variable definition, it will start saving the token stream. And as soon as you get to the point where the variable is used, instead of parsing it again, instead of parsing the variable, you remove that and you replace it with the token stream and parse that. So that's how you implement it, roughly. And yeah, it's kind of messy. Okay, let's stop here for today. I think it's Friday. I don't want to keep anybody here for hours and hours. And also, I think we got to a good place. So let's switch back to my big head. And yeah, I think we did good today. The tagged enter widget, like skeleton, is done and it's fine. We have a demo. It works as one would expect. It's the minimal amount of API that I'm comfortable exposing, but it's by no means the end of the API and the end of the implementation. Documentation wise, it could be better. I'm usually less verbose when it comes to actual widgets, because the API, it is what it is. Again, smaller API means fewer ways to screw it up, so it doesn't need to be extremely verbose in its documentation. And after that, I think I'll clean up a little bit and then open a draft of a merge request, so Alex can have a look at it and critique everything he finds in this code. And also, especially the design team can look at it and just insult me. So I will have to fix it. I can think of a bunch of things that can be replaced in the code already. Like the tag should probably be built. Both the tag and the tagged entry could probably be built using UI definition files instead of being defined in code. Right now it's easier to do in code because I can modify a bunch of stuff. The other thing that I should do is implement the buildable interface, so I can define tags as objects inside the UI definition file. It's either that or have the ability to... So it's either having a custom element like tags, and then you define each tag by name and label and color, for instance, or CSS class, or I add a custom child. So you use child and then the object, you create a tag object with the properties already set. Yeah, another thing that it could probably be interesting is using CSS classes as well on tag objects. So you have a list of predefined classes in your application's custom style, and you just apply the CSS class instead of having API to define the color and apply the color. It's a bit like GTK level bar works, if that makes any sense. So you can define the levels and using CSS. That might require changing the tag object from an object to a widget at that point. So it's a trade-off that way. And yeah, it's it should be fine at that point. And then I will have to go through the existing applications that use the tagged entry, so Nautilus, Epiphany, and Photos, and look at how they're using the API that it's in libgd, and see if I'm not going to port them, because porting them to GTK4 is going to be a mess, but I'm going to look at the difference between the API that I introduced and the API in libgd. Use them to add a 1N into a search entry. That's an option. That's an option. I wonder if you should add GTK search entry. Yeah, that's another solution. I'm not entirely. I don't know if I want to add more API to GTK search entry. GTK search entry has already some obscure bits of API that I'm not really fond of, but you never know. Oh, thanks for the follow, Baines. So we'll see. But yeah, I think I don't want to guess the feedback before submitting this, because usually that way ends up making a mess. I want to ensure that I'm open to all potential feedback instead of trying to prevent some feedback. Okie dokes. So I think we're good for today. If you're watching this, feel free to follow me on Twitch for more streams about writing documentation and writing GTK widgets and writing code for GTK and GNOME. Otherwise, you might be watching this on YouTube. I usually upload the VOD the day after the stream on my YouTube channel. So you can also follow me on YouTube to get notified whenever I upload new videos. Following me on Twitch instead will get you notified when I start streaming, which will let you get the full experience of me talking for a couple of hours, 2 hours and a half, about writing code, the history of GNOME, or writing documentation, and random rants about free and open source software. Otherwise, I will see you next week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I hope you have a great rest of the day and an awesome weekend. So have fun, and I shall see you on Monday. Let me see. Bye.